Hi, welcome back to Ukes of Alex, the ukulele channel where we dive headfirst into ukulele and ukulele culture, come up for air and just try and have some fun along the way. But what we're going to look at today is something that I think is probably largely a UK/European ukulele community thing, because I think we have, and I think many of you will agree, there's a large contingent of older people who pick up the ukulele, and there's a more traditional sense of word of mouth recommendations. And you know, I can only speak from my own experience, but the same things come up and crop up again. When you're working in a ukulele store, you get the same thing happen all the time, where people come in with the same inquiries, the same queries, and they're not necessarily applicable. So today we're going to take a look at what I think are 10 of the myths and preconceptions about the ukulele that are false or not necessarily applicable to everybody. It's just a short list, it's a bit of fun. Hopefully you have some fun with me, but if you've got any to add to this list, please do add a comment below. Number 1, you don't need a clip-on tuner, use an app on your phone, which is fine if you're only playing at home. Because you see, the apps on your phone, clip-on tuners, you can get a free one or you can get one that costs £1, and then it's really good, and it's very intuitive and they work absolutely fine. But you're probably getting that advice from a friend at a ukulele group or in a ukulele lesson, which means that there's multiple people playing ukuleles at the same time, and your phone cannot differentiate between 5 or 6 different people making noise in the same room. Also, I found in the past, if you're in a room that has a low-level electronic hum or any kind of background noise at all, that tuner is going to pick up that hum over the sound of your ukulele, or it's going to confuse the tuner. Whereas a clip-on tuner is not working from a microphone. Some are, but most of them are working from vibration. So you put it on the end of your headstock, and what you get is the vibration being translated into the tuner. So if you're in a crowded room, or you're in a room where there's even a remote bit of noise, that tuner is going to work effectively on your ukulele and your ukulele alone. The other thing to consider, and this is just personal opinion now, is that the phone app ukulele tuners are just really friggin' annoying. Like, because you're going to put it on your knee or you're going to put it near you so that you can try and tune your instrument, but you're playing around with technology rather than focusing on the core thing in hand, which is the ukulele. It's the same reason when I was a teacher that I tried to avoid having students use a clip-on tuner at all, because young students, you know, people who are under 10, they tend to get caught up with the technology in their hand rather than the instrument they're playing. And you know, ultimately we're all just these big old animals at heart. You know, we're all in the jungle just trying to kind of make use of what we have, and I find technology a distraction. So avoiding the phone element of it, the entire world in your hand, and just going for the clip-on tuner, or even better, a pitch pipe, so you develop natural pitch, is a much better option. And anybody that gives you the advice that you use the phone app, they're just cheaping out, because ultimately a clip-on tuner can be as little as £7 or £8. You can probably pick one up on, you know, from a local music shop for under £10 at the time of filming. Number 2, Aquila strings make everything better. This has been going on for over a decade, and it's actually got worse over time. It's people in a ukulele group or people who are getting their friend into the ukulele saying, you've got a really cheap uke, but if you replace the strings with Aquila strings, you're going to make it better. Now that was true 12 years ago. And 12 years ago, several people probably wrote that in blogs or in forums, and then that's just been recycled and recycled and recycled. But actually, technology has caught up and overtaken that information. In 2008, 2009, if you bought a ukulele, it probably had black nylon strings on it, really stretchy strings that gave it a traditional uke sound. But if your instrument was really cheap, or if your instrument was just unrefined and hadn't been set up, then those black nylon strings would be quite prone to temperature changes and just fiddly. And Aquila had this knack for being the best string to put on cheaper ukuleles, because it was slightly less stretchy than nylon, slightly harder, and being white, you remembered it. So you would say you want the white strings, you want Aquila, you want them on your ukulele. And then over time, the brands actually got this feedback because it was such a popular thing to say. Most of them switched to Aquila. In fact, Aquila, one of the smartest things they ever did was send thousands and thousands of sets of their strings to factories in the Far East who were producing affordable instruments and putting Aquila on them. Even some of the high-end brands would use Aquila. But the trends of the ukulele have changed, and now the other string type that we've not mentioned so far, fluorocarbon, is the most popular string type. And actually, if you have a beginner's ukulele or an intermediate ukulele, if it's got Aquilas on it, fine, you can stick with Aquilas, that's great. But if it's got a clear fluorocarbon string on, you're actually doing yourself a disservice, I think, if you take them off to put Aquila on, because fluorocarbon has the least amount of stretch of any of the strings. Quite often it's the thinnest material, it's the softest, and it has the cleanest sound, which is fantastic when you're a beginner. So when somebody at your ukulele group, or when somebody trying to get you into the ukulele says you want some Aquila strings on your uke, just bear in mind that their information may be a decade out of date. Before we go on today, I just want to thank today's sponsor, which is me. I'm releasing a new single called I Don't Want to Be Free on June 1st, 2023. You can stream on any of the streaming platforms. You can support me by buying the single at my website, alexbeds.co.uk, and there will be an album following later in the year. The links you need are in the description, and thank you so much in advance for giving me your time. Lock me back up, I don't want to be free. Friends try to take away my pain, but you have to scar through it to heal. How could anyone want me if I don't want myself? Lock me back up, I don't wanna be free. Okay, the next one is the advice that I get from people coming in. If it's a laminate, it's crap. If it's a laminate to ukulele, that means that the pieces of wood are veneer. You know, they are sandwiches of wood. You have the wood on the top, and you've got some kind of plywood core, and then you've got the other piece at the other side if you're lucky. Sometimes it's just two pieces. And the consensus is that laminates are rubbish. And I am here to tell you now that if your ukulele costs you under £200, there are many viable options that are laminate. There are many viable options that are solid top. You might get something secondhand that's solid wood, but the variance is going to be marginal. There are marginal gains in a solid top, sometimes not at all. I'll give you an actual in the field example as of 2023, the Kai KTI 90 or the Kai KTI 30. They're laminate mango or laminate maple tenor ukuleles. They are £10 cheaper than the solid top version, which is solid mahogany. The laminate mango and maple versions are 5 times more popular than the mahogany one. They just work, and the modern technology and the modern way of building, these laminates are much thinner than they used to be. So the ukuleles themselves are often deceptively refined for the price. Anyone who watches this channel regularly will know that when I interviewed Barry Maz and Matt Warnes of World of Ukes, we talked about how it's a great time to be a beginner because there's so much on the market that's great. Whereas 10 years ago, the cheaper ukuleles were just overbuilt, thick. They were frustrated guitars. You know, they wanted to be guitars, but they weren't big enough. And now the high-end ukuleles have influenced the more affordable ones. And as a result, a laminate is no longer a dirty word. So, you know, if your friend said it must be a solid top, just know that you could be doing yourself a disservice. Next one, get a insert ukulele here. They're amazing. Well, they might be amazing for you, and word of mouth is certainly important, but there's absolutely nothing to say that one person who loves an Enya Nova U polycarbonate ukulele will be the same as the next person. You know, polycarbonate instruments, for example, when people say get a Nova U, they're fantastic as like your 5th or 6th uke. If you've already got other ukuleles or you've already had other ukes and you want something that you can bung in a suitcase, then the Nova U suddenly becomes appealing because you have the benefit of experience in how you play. But I would say if you're an absolute beginner and your first ukulele was a Nova U, you know, something made of polycarbonate, they have very limited tonal range, and actually you're robbing yourself of an instrument that can be more dynamic and help you improve your playing at the beginning. I've used the Nova U as an example, but the same thing goes for several other things as well. Lots and lots of people say, oh, you know, about the solid top thing. Lots of people say you need to get this ukulele because it's a solid top. I can tell you now, there are plenty of solid top ukuleles that are not as good as the laminate ukulele at the same price. So the way to remedy this is if somebody recommends a ukulele, do some research. I've made probably 350 videos now comparing different ukuleles on Southern Ukulele Store. There's other shops out there that are friendly and helpful, and they will have made their own videos, or they will have given you information too. Do a little bit of research, make it fun, make this purchase really, really fun for yourself. And you can always ask a shop as well. For example, I probably spend 3 hours of my 8-hour working day answering these kind of questions on the phone. But I do also get people walk in the shop who don't want to look at the hundreds of ukes on the wall. They just want the Enya Nova U, or they just want the Carla KAS because that's what their friends told them to get. But don't rob yourself of a fun shopping experience. And the next thing is to do with sizes, because for every person who says buy this ukulele, there's also that person who says you must get a concert size, or you must get a tenor size, or it must be a soprano. And actually there's very little attention paid to what's going to suit the person playing the instrument in the end. Some ukulele groups you get one person who started the ukulele group with a soprano, and then you'll end up with 10 people in the group that have sopranos. And very few people know that they can get something different. And actually, variety is the spice of life. The idea of a ukulele orchestra of all of these different sizes is because everything can be slightly different. And let's face it, if you had a roast dinner and all you had on it was a plate of carrots, it's not a roast dinner. Having all of these other components in place are going to make it a lot more fun. If you're 6'2", please don't buy a soprano as your first ukulele. Go and try a couple of different sizes, or if you can't try a couple of different sizes, maybe just see if anyone else in the group has got a different size, or maybe you get a few different opinions. But don't just assume because your friend says you need a concert that you need a concert, because you may well find that you don't bond with the instrument if you get something too small or something too big. And there's such a wide variety of different sizes and shapes and styles out there, then just take a bit of time, I guess. The next piece of advice pains me. It's don't get a baritone, or if you do get a baritone, string it GCEA. No. No, you don't have to do that. If you get a baritone, you can get a baritone chord book and you can learn some new shapes. It can be fun. I mean, sure, it's daunting, if you've got a different size to everyone else, or if you've learnt a familiar pattern of chord shapes and you're thinking, well, I don't want to change, I don't want to have to change what I'm playing along with everybody. That's fine, but you could buy a baritone ukulele, and for when you're playing in the group, you could buy a capo and put it on the 5th fret, and you can get the same effect as playing a tenor ukulele in GCEA. But if you take that DGBE away from a baritone, I think there's a common misconception that putting GCEA strings on it will give you a normal ukulele but with this big sound. And actually that's not what I found at all. What I found at all is that you can strangle the sound of a baritone by putting GCEA strings on it. That's not to say they're not popular. Lots of people choose to play GCEA. I've gone through phases of doing that myself on a baritone ukulele. And it's difficult because if it's your first ukulele and you're playing a baritone, I can understand why you might be a bit daunted. But remember, you can get a capo, you can put it on the 5th fret, and then when you're not in need of playing with other people, you can take that 5th fret off, and you can take that capo off the 5th fret, and you can learn an entirely new skill. Just my take on it though. So while we're speaking about tuning, let's go on to the next one, which is you need a low G. It's going to sound better with a low G. There's always someone in the ukulele group who's discovered a low G, and it's that kind of thing where you go, it's so revelatory when you first open up that lower octave that you recommend it to everyone around you. But if you're an absolute beginner, you probably don't need a low G, because if you're learning from a book or if you're learning from videos on YouTube, most of the tuition that you will be paying attention to will be high G. Learn the basics so that when you get to the point where you're starting to fingerpick, or if you get to the point where you really feel that you are hitting a plateau, then give a low G a try. Even if you've got an instrument you've had for 6 months and you're like, oh, I'm a bit tired of this now, you can refresh an entire instrument by switching to low G. But if you go for it at the start, then you quite often end up working backwards to go forwards. So sticking with a high G at the beginning is something I highly recommend as a teacher, as somebody that talks to people trying ukuleles for the first time every single day. Okay, the next one is another low G inquiry. It's when people say, don't have a wound low G, you won't like it. Now I can tell you that is, of all of the things I say here, that's up there with the Aquila are amazing misconception. If you are going to play a low G, you are going to look at the ukulele with the low G on when it's wound, and you're going to think it looks strange. And there is a very small portion of people out there that have tried a low G that was wound and they don't like the texture. But most of those people make that decision straight away, and then they forever don't like wound strings. But an unwound low G is much thicker than a wound low G. So an unwound low G is actually something that a beginner can find is less accurate. It's a bit slippery. It can be harder to use. And quite a few people go off low G tuning because they use an unwound low G at somebody else's recommendation. A wound low G is thinner, it's more accurate, and most of us are not too hypersensitive to the texture that it bothers us. And there's even hybrid strings like a Fremont Soloist or a Ukelogic smooth wound string that's completely flat wound, so it has a winding but you can't really feel it. So don't be put off a wound low G purely because somebody else has told you that it didn't work for them, because the majority of players out there at the advanced stages prefer the wound string. Okay, the next one is the reason I'm making this video today, because I had somebody come in the shop, and it must happen once a month. People ring up or they come in and they say, my friend says I need a pickup. Now, if you're watching this and you don't know what a pickup is, I'm telling you now, you don't need one. If you're watching this and you actually have the need for a pickup, then that's a discussion worth having. But a pickup is the thing inside your instrument that will enable you to plug it into an amplifier. At the beginning stages of your playing, it's very unlikely that you're going to need to plug into an amplifier unless you just want to mess around and make some nice tones. If you're a beginner playing in a ukulele group and someone in your group has said that all of you need ukuleles with pickups in, first of all, that's a lot of expense across 10 to 20 different players. But second of all, you are not necessarily all going to be plugging in when you play live. Most of the time, the more successful and competent ukulele ensembles, ukulele groups playing, have one or two players that lead, they plug into an amplifier. And if you're not somebody who's absolutely shit hot at playing in time, or somebody that's really not confident enough to fingerpick a melody when other people are playing around you, then you don't absolutely need a pickup. You're going to limit the amount of choice you have from beginners' instruments, because only 1 in 10 ukuleles at the beginner's level will have a pickup as standard. That in itself should tell you that you don't need a pickup, because if everyone needed one from day one, then every ukulele would come with one from day one. And the absolute last thing for this video is go to your local guitar shop and get some advice. That advice is deadly, because I know in my heart as a ukulele shop manager that most guitar shops in the world do not care about ukuleles. It's an unfortunate thing, but the ukulele will always be viewed by the majority of guitar shops as the poor relation to the guitar. The culture of guitarists, it's very different to the ukulele culture. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's very different. It's a bit more competitive, let's say. And if you go into your average music shop that does guitars, pianos, drums, etc., they will have a very small ukulele section. If you walk up to that ukulele section before any member of staff has spoken to you, you will probably find that those ukuleles are dusty. And that's because nobody there is passionate about the ukulele. If you go into a guitar shop and you ask somebody for advice about the ukulele, that's the place where you're probably going to get the weakest or most inconsistent advice. Not because they don't know what they're talking about, it's just you're not necessarily asking them about a subject that they care about. It's exactly the same. I'll give you a first-hand example. You know, I used to sell mandolins. I know nothing about the mandolin except how it's tuned. So when we used to sell mandolins, we would get a mandolin in, we would get it out of the box, we would tune it up, we would check that it was okay, and we would go, yeah, that's fine. And then the next time we would look at that mandolin is when someone specifically wanted to know about it. Whereas if you sell ukuleles all the time, you know when you get it out of the box what you're checking for. You know what size works. You know what makes them tick, what makes them different. And it's just not possible for a shop, for every music shop, to know every instrument intimately. I don't claim to be a banjo expert. I don't claim to be a mandolin expert. I know ukuleles, I know guitars, and anything else I would put my hands up and I'd say, look, I'm not the best person to ask about this. And too often, because general music shops are trying to be general music shops, that's where you get inconsistent advice. There are some amazing general music shops out there. I'm not slagging anyone off by name, but as a rule, if you go in there and the ukuleles are dusty, the person behind the counter probably only has a limited bandwidth of information that can help you. There you have it, folks. There's 10 things they tell you at the start about the ukulele that are misconceptions or not quite fleshed out concepts. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Please, 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 please have a look at the links in the description. I'm on Patreon. I'd love it if you join me on patreon.com/ukesofalex. There's a PayPal tip jar in the description, and there's links to some of my own music and some of my previous videos now. I'd be absolutely delighted if you would support me any way you can, whether it's a subscribe, a like, a comment, or a share. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.